Section 2.3, solving inequalities using multiplication and division. In section 2.3, we're basically using the same rules as 2.2. We're going to use inverse operations. Okay, so if we're like in example number 1 here, we're dividing, so we're going to undo that by multiplying. Here in number 2, we're multiplying, so we're going to undo that by dividing. The rules don't change. The rules don't change. We're going to just basically solve the inequality as if it were an equation. Use inverse operations, get the variable by itself. So number 1, I've got x divided by 8 is greater than negative 5. So to undo dividing, I need to multiply. I'm going to multiply by 8. So the 8's will cancel out. I'm left with x. Negative 5 times 8 is negative 40. And my inequality sign comes straight down. So x is greater than negative 40. Go ahead and graph your solution. So I got negative 40 here, negative 39, negative 41. Could I go by tens? Sure, I could do negative 40, negative 30, negative 50. That would be a perfectly acceptable way to number that number line, but I just did by ones. This is an open circle because we do not have the or equal to part in our inequality, so I'm going to have an open circle at negative 40, and it says x is greater than, again, out to the right. Okay, greater than is always to the right. Number 2, negative 24 is greater than or equal to 3x. Again, I want to get x by itself, so I'm originally multiplying x by 3, so I'm going to undo that by dividing by 3. So the 3's cancel out. On the right-hand side, I'm going to have x. Left-hand side, negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. Now, my variable's on the right-hand side. If you want to rewrite it so the variable is on the left, you can certainly do that. In my original inequality, my sign is pointing towards x, so when I flip it over, my inequality sign still has to point towards x, and then we can graph it from there. So we'll put a number line here, 1, 2, 3. So I've got negative 8 in the middle, negative 7 to the right, negative 9 on the left, and then this one's a closed circle because I do have the or equal to part here. So I'm going to have a closed circle at negative 8, and this says x is less than negative 8. Less than always points to the left. I've said that a bunch over the course of the videos here for chapter 2, but it's always true. Less than always goes to the left. All right, number 3, negative 6.4 is greater than 1/5 w. When you've got a fraction in front of a variable, to get rid of the fraction, you got one of two options. You can either divide by the fraction, or you can do what I think is easier and multiply by its reciprocal. Reciprocal, again, means just flip over the fraction. So the reciprocal of 1/5 is 5, or 5 over 1. So we'll multiply both sides by 5. The 1/5 and the 5 cancel each other out. Okay, so on the right-hand side, I'm just left with w. On the left-hand side, if you need a calculator, please feel free to use that. 5 times negative 6.4 is actually negative 32. Okay, so we'll go ahead and graph our inequality. Notice that I've got all any negative numbers here so far. So I've got negative 32 here, negative 31, negative 30. This one is an open circle because, again, don't have the or equal to part. So open circle at negative 32. Now, my inequality is written backwards, so my variable's on the right. If you want to leave it that way, perfectly fine. If you want to rewrite it so the variable is on the left, you certainly can do that. My inequality sign was pointing towards the w, so when I flip it over, it still has to point to the w. So I got another less than, which means that is to the left. So we're going to go out this direction. Okay, and then the last one, 4b is less than or equal to 36. I'm taking b, I'm dividing it or multiplying it by 4. So to undo multiplying again, I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Divide both sides by 4. 36 divided by 4 is 9, and then my inequality sign stays the same. B is less than or equal to 9, so my variable's on the left already, so I don't need to flip anything over. 8, 9, 10. This one's closed because it's the or equal to part, and then it's less than again, so out to the left. Now, multiplying and dividing, not terribly difficult, but there is one catch, and that is when we multiply or divide by negative numbers. Okay, when we multiply or divide by a negative number, and the key word here is by. When we multiply or divide by a negative number, we need to flip the inequality sign. Okay, we had negative numbers in these examples, like in number 1 here. Whoops, I want the pointer here. We had a negative number here, but we didn't multiply by a negative number. We multiplied by 8. We multiplied by positive 8. if you multiply or divide by a positive number, your inequality sign is not going to change direction. Okay, so here we multiplied by 8, we divided by 3 here, multiplied by 5, multiplied or divided by 4. Okay, all of what I was doing to the inequality would involve positive numbers. Okay, I don't care if this number is negative. That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about this number here. What you're doing to the inequality to solve it. Okay, again, don't care what that number is. I'm curious what that one is. That one is the one that decides whether or not we flip the inequality sign. Okay, so let's try one here. Number 1, x over negative 3 is less than 2. So to undo dividing, I need to multiply, and I'm going to multiply by negative 3. Multiply by negative 3. So this is an example of multiplying by a negative number. Okay, so the negative 3's cancel out. I'm left with x. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Now, my inequality sign originally was less than. When I multiply by a negative, it actually changes direction and now becomes greater than. Okay, x is greater than negative 6. Okay, so when we go ahead and graph this, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, I'm going to have an open circle at negative 6, and now it's greater than, so greater than is out to the right. If you're curious why that happens, let me show you. So if I take two numbers, let's say 2, that's a z, 2 and 3. Right now, 2 is less than 3. That's a statement, okay? If I multiply by 2, positive 2, I've got 4, I've got 6, still less than. Okay, if I multiply by negative 2, let's try writing that again, times negative 2. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Which one's bigger? Now negative 4 is bigger. Okay, so when you multiply by a negative, your sign changes direction. Okay, there's a kind of a visual of why we need to do that. Okay, so number 2, negative 7y is less than or equal to negative 35. I've got y, multiplying it by negative 7. To undo multiplying by negative 7, I need to divide by negative 7. Okay, so the negative 7's cancel, I got y. Negative 35 divided by negative 7 is a positive 5, but I divided by a negative, so what happens with my inequality sign? It changes direction again. So it was less than or equal to, now it's greater than or equal to. Okay, so we've got our inequality solved. Let's go ahead and graph it real quick. 1, 2, 3. So I got negative, I don't need negatives, I got a positive number here finally. 4, 5, 6. This one is a closed circle at 5 because it's or equal to, and now it's greater than, so again we're going out to the right. Number 3, negative 9m is greater than 63. I've got m, I'm multiplying it by negative 9, so to undo multiplying, I've got to divide both sides by negative 9. The 9's cancel. 63 divided by negative 9 is negative 7. And again, multiplying or dividing by a negative, so my inequality sign changes direction. It was greater than, it is now less than. Okay, so when I go ahead and graph this, 1, 2, 3, negative 8, negative 7, negative 6. This one's an open circle. Again, no or equal to part, and it's now less than, so we're going out to the left. And number 4, a over 4 is less than or equal to negative 7. So I've got a, dividing it by dividing it by 4. So to undo dividing by 4, we need to multiply by 4, both sides. Those 4's cancel. Negative 7 times 4 is negative 28. The question is now, does the sign change direction? The answer here is no. I multiplied by positive 4. Again, I don't care what that number is. It could be positive, it could be negative. It doesn't matter. What I'm focused on is this number. Is it negative? The answer is no. So my sign does not change direction. It stays less than or equal to. Okay, so then I can go ahead and graph this. Negative 29, negative 28, negative 27. Closed circle at negative 28, and an arrow out to the left. Okay, so hopefully you see the difference between multiplying and dividing by positives like we had on this page, and then multiplying and dividing by negatives on that page. Okay, got a story problem here for you. You have $3.65 to spend on copies. Each copy costs 15 cents to make. Number 1, write and solve an inequality that describes the number of copies you can make. Well, let's see. If I take the number of copies times the cost, that gives me my total. Whoops. That's what I owe whatever business or location I'm making copies at. Well, my total, I know I can't go over 365. That's my budget. I don't know how many copies I'm making, but I do know they cost 15 cents. And I could write 15 cents as 0.15 if we're thinking in terms of dollars. Okay, so we'll have 0.15x. Now, I have 365, so I could spend exactly 365, but I can't spend more than that. So that's got to be less than or equal to 3.65. Now, if you want to, it says to solve it. So to solve it, we're going to divide both sides by 0.15. 0.15. So I got x. 3.65 divided by 0.15 is 24.3 repeating. My inequality sign is not going to change direction because I'm divided by a positive number. So this is still less than or equal to 24.3 repeating. Number 2, what's the maximum number of copies you can make? Well, the inequality kind of tells us 24.3 repeating. But the question then becomes, what's 1/3? Because 0.3 repeating is 1/3. What's a third of a copy look like? Is it possible to make a third of a copy? And I don't think it is. So really the answer here is 24. Okay, so if I make 24 copies times 0.15, that gives me $3.60. If I wanted to make 25 copies at 15 cents a piece, that would give me $3.75. Well, the problem says I only have $3.65, so I can't make 25 copies because I don't have $3.75. The maximum number of copies I can make is 24, and I'll have a nickel left over.